Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. If you've never been here before, my name is Jakub, and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. I hope you had a great week. I hope you went out with your cameras, and now I hope you're ready for some more photography reviews. Now, for those who never been here, if you want to join us for episode of photography review show, if you want to send us your images, there's nothing easier to do that than just heading to our website, cleverphotographer.com/membership. You can join our membership there for a little fee. You will get access to the photography review show, and you will also get access to monthly asset bundle, which is always around certain theme. So, for example, in March, it was wedding photography, and you will get over 200 different assets, including skies, overlays, textures, backgrounds, just anything you can imagine, presets, LUTs, and so much stuff. So if you want to join us for the next episode of Photography Review Show, head to our website, cleverphotographer.com, and join us there. For this week, we have lots of great photos. And just to make sure that we can go through all of them, let's start right away. So let me switch the camera. Just for those who are watching us from the replay, if you want to join us or for the live session, you can join us every Monday at 6 p.m. of UK time. So you can just go to Google and find out where is that following your own time, and join us from 6 every Monday on our YouTube channel, so Clever Photographer YouTube channel. You can also join us on our Facebook page, Clever Photographer Facebook page, or you can join us in a Clever Photographer Academy. So those are the three places where you can join us every Monday from 6 p.m. Now, moving towards the reviews. So what do? We have a three-part review, and usually we take the images and we look at the technical part of the image, where I look at your camera settings, and then I look at the sharpness, the light, and everything that comes together with the technical part of the image. Once we have a look at that, we then turn to the artistic part of the image, where I talk to you more about composition, about the overall message, maybe about how you could use certain composition techniques, and we look at that part of your photo. And finally, at the end, if there is something that I could suggest you when it comes to photo editing, we then take the image and try to edit it or add to it something that I think that maybe can help to your images. So we look at the technical, artistic, and editing part of your image. It's going to be lots of fun. So let's start right away. So starting from here, we are looking at two images from Caroline, and we have this beautiful photo of the, I would say, cathedral or maybe a castle in a landscape, and then we have this sunset with a cross and beautiful field. So just before we start, just to say hello everyone who joined us. Thank you very much for joining us live. If you can, make sure that you send me a message wherever you're watching from. Just post it in the text or comment under the video. Just say hello, where you from, where you watching from. It would be great if you could join us that way. Anyway, I'm already seeing that Evgeny Oyenia is joining us. So good evening, and I hope that you're doing well. We have two images from you to look at later, so thank you. Then we have Zdeněk all the way from South Africa. Zdeněk, thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait to see your pictures neither. So anybody who's watching live, make sure that you jump into the comments, say hello, say where you're watching from, and we can start. So Caroline, starting with the first image right here. This was captured with Canon 5D Mark IV. The camera settings, ISO 100, 78 millimeters, f11 1/50th of a second. Now, looking at the camera, it was 70 to 200 millimeters. Starting with the ISO, as always, especially for landscape photography, 100 ISO is exactly the goal and the thing we are looking for. So well done there. 78 millimeters, giving us this nice zoom. That's really nice too. F11, making sure that everything is nice and sharp all the way. That works really well too. And finally, 1/50th of a second, again, making sure that the sharpness is as good as possible. So from the camera setting, I wouldn't actually say anything to it. I think it's perfect. Keeping the ISO nice and low, sticking to the nice f11, making sure that you're getting most out of your lens. And 1/50th of a second, depending on which mood on your camera you're using, just making sure that you have a good level of exposure and everything is nice and sharp. So when we kind of zoom in, you can see that we get a really nice level of details on the building here as well as the trees, and you can really see quite lots of details all the way through. There is a tiny bit of noise around the image, something just maybe what coming out of the camera rather than from the higher ISO. Maybe sometimes also this can happen with a low light situation, and this certainly seems like maybe a later sunset. Now, we have a little bit of sensor dust here, and that's something we can take care of in a moment. But other than that, I think it's a great picture. Lots happening on it. And when we look at the artistic part of the image and talk about the composition, it's really nicely done. Now, I think there is different ways of how you can use the rule of third in an image. And in this one, when you keep lots of sky in, it can work really nicely too. If we just quickly jump into the edit and open the crop, we can see the thirds. So with the rule of thirds, when it comes to landscape, you can do two things. You can either keep 2/3 of your image as a land and then 1/3 of the image sky. Or you can do it the other way around. You can keep 1/3 of your image the land or the landscape, and then 2/3 of the image of the sky. Both works very, very well, especially when the sky is really interesting. So this is a really smart way of doing this. You have a really powerful sky. Your building or the main subject is dropping nicely on the cross of the thirds here. So it's really an important part of your image. And I think in overall, it actually works very, very well. So as a composition goes, it's really nicely done. Now, when we go back, there is only one thing I wish that you could have avoided, and that's just the leaves here. Everything else is working really well. It's just that this part of the trees and bushes, which are kind of poking out, are taking a little bit of the attention away. But that's fine. It's not a big deal. Something that you could probably fix quite easily in Photoshop or maybe even here in Luminar. Either way, it's really, really lovely picture. Now, moving on the second one, which is really powerful. I really, really like this picture. I think it's beautiful, great, powerful composition here. So let's start, as always, with the technical part. Again, we are still with Canon 5D Mark IV. The lens is 24 to 70, 2.8. And then from your camera settings, we are on ISO 100, 24 millimeters, f11, and 0.6 seconds. So ISO 100, once again, spot on. 24 millimeters for a landscape capture is probably about as wide as I would go before starting to use the panorama technique. So well done there. F11, again, making sure we have the details all the way through. Well done there. And 0.6 seconds, obviously, in a lower light situation is what you need to use. I would assume that your camera would be on tripod and really using the power of the camera and capturing all the colors, including all the details. So again, the setting of your camera, spot on. Let's just zoom in and see the details, which are really lovely all the way from the beginning, where you have these little pieces of grass all the way to the cross and tree. It really works very well here. I love the light. I love the warm glow at the end. It's just very nicely done. Caroline, moving on the composition. It's really, really nice. I think it's really powerful, almost kind of simple in some ways with just the two trees and a cross. I just think it's very nice. You know, there could be different ways of cropping it, but as an artist, it's more artistic decision rather than anything being wrong. I like the fact that the cross is in the middle. I think the 2 trees on each side works very well too. The foreground of the grass is an interesting idea. I can't say nothing about it. It's nicely done. The only thing I think is a little bit unnatural is the amount of light on it. However, again, as an artistic decision and artistic part, you creating the image, I think it can work quite well too. So well done there. Not much to say. It's a nice little story with the cross and with the sunset. I think it works. So good capture. Moving back to the first one and talking about what you could do differently, well, I would probably bring it to the edit module here and take care of the sensor dust. Here in Luminar Neo, this can be done really easily. You just go into the erase tool, and at the bottom of the tool, there is a tool called remove dust spots. All you need to do is to click on it. It will scan the image, find these spots, and remove them. So if we zoom into the areas where I know we had some here, you can see the before and after. Now, if there are still some spots that we missed, you can really simply just click on them, brush over them. Let's see if we can find anything else. No, I think everything else is gone. So all you do is you just pick these spots and then again click on erase. It takes a second and it erases these spots. So that's the first thing I would do. I would remove the sensor dust. After that, the next thing, I would probably adjust the white balance a little bit. I can see lots of green in it. So what I would do, I would go into the develop tool, then the color, and here I can adjust the temperature and the tint of the image. So maybe just a little bit of tint, more towards the magenta, just to remove the green. Now, sometimes it's not visible immediately, but when I show you the before and how much green was there in a sky and on the building, and then I do after, you can see the difference. So I don't know if maybe all the way to 29, but at least 20 would be something I could do. Also, what you can do to remove this kind of tint is to use a color tool, which has this remove color cast slider. When you push it, it removes some of the color cast and help us with the overall image. It's really pretty. To finish it off, we could use a little bit of enhanced AI and just push it out a little bit. However, I think an overall lovely image. Moving to the second one, here, rather than editing, I was thinking about different crops. For example, we can try the 16:9 just to get reduced of a little bit of the grass. That would be the first thing I would try, maybe to get something like this. Then you have the main subject standing out a little bit more. There is still the same amount of grass there, so the thing would be just a little bit more out and it would pop out more of the image. So that is maybe something you could do. You could also crop it completely differently. You could kind of turn it around and then adjust it, like maybe not like this, maybe on 4 on 5 and turn it around and maybe get something like this. Again, crop it a little bit further. And this way, again, you have your grass and you have the main subject in. So that would be just something that I would try to play around with it and find the best balance between the amount of grass and between the main subject. But those are all more artistic decisions rather than mistakes. So it's just something to try and give you an idea for the future. Caroline, thank you very much for sharing your images with us. It was a pleasure to review them for you. And now it's time to move to another photographer. Next photographer is David. David, it's time to look at your images. So let's start straight from the beginning. Now, this is very creative capture. We have a big sun here, then we have a forest, then we have these people on the balloon, and that's the first one. And then moving on the second one, we have this building here, a really lovely building with lots of blue on it. So let's start right away from the beginning, talking about the first image. This was captured with the Nikon D800, or part of the image anyway, with camera details, ISO 100, 300 millimeters, f11, and 1/320th of a second. Now, looking at it, I don't know if it's the case or not, but the people here seems to be they don't look very natural there. Now, this could be because of a sky replacement, which is a little bit visible because the line that is used to pull these people away is kind of there and it's not there. So that may be as the first thing. Also, when you look into these spaces, you can see that the sky doesn't really belong there. Second possibility is that you have added the people with the parachute there, so then they are on top of it. So I don't know which part of the image was captured with these details. However, looking at it, the actual camera setting isn't wrong. With the ISO 100, keeping it nice and low, with the f11, again, getting the most out of your camera, and with the 1/320th of a second, it's nothing wrong there. What I think is more something that you would have to look at is the overall realistic feel of the image, which when you look at it, my first impression was that this balloon was added in post-processing. Then the second thing I see is the sun, which also looks a little bit unnatural. And then I look at it a little bit closer and I start to see the sky replacement or whatever sky adjustments you done to it, which is also a little bit visible. So something to definitely work on there. And overall, as an idea for the artistic part of the image, it's quite lovely. I understand what you're trying to do. You have the sun and the people are coming towards it, but also still continue on the same note talking about the realistic part of the image. You can also see, looking at it, that the sun was coming from this part, so kind of not directly from behind them, but from a side, where your sky has the sun in front of them. So in reality, they would be dark mostly on this side. So it would work a little bit differently. So it's just a different things to work on and try. However, I appreciate the creativity and the fact that you tried. It's just a little bit too visible that the fact that you have play around with the different elements. Moving on the second image. So we have the house here. Now, this is looking like a different camera, Fujifilm, with, again, camera settings, ISO 100, 24 millimeters, f13, 1/80th of a second. So ISO 100, again, good choice right there. 24 millimeter is nice and wide lens. To be honest, when I capture like a cityscape, when I'm in a city and I have a narrow streets, I actually don't mind to use even wider lens. I quite often use 12 to 24 for this kind of capture, and that usually gives me a chance to capture as much as possible. F13, again, just making sure that you have the details all the way through. However, I would probably stick to the lower numbers if possible, especially in a daylight situation. You can really make sure that you get the most out of your lens. And the idea is that your f-stop would be around f7.1 in that case. 1/80th of a second on the shutter speed. All good there. So let's just move on onto the image. And again, when we look at it, you can kind of start to see, for example, this quite unnatural glow around the top of the building. So something definitely to work on. Again, maybe it's because there was sky replacement done, or that it was really over processed. That's also the case when you get this really strong glow. But I think in this case, it's more the fact that the sky was replaced. The sky actually really nicely matched the blue for the rest of the image, so I understand the idea of that. But when you look at it, the first impression, the first thing I see is the amount of glow around. Second thing I'm thinking, it's also really, really cool. So it's kind of more on the blue side. So it would need a little bit of warmth for myself. And that's about it to start. Let me just zoom in there. Also, when you look at the image, you can see that part of it kind of disappear here. There was maybe some cloning done, or it disappeared behind the sky. So in overall, these things are visible. Now, when I talk about composition, I think these really tight crops can work if they are done in like really powerful scenes, where when I look at this image, it just seems that you really cropped too tight and missed even parts of the main building. So let's say that the main subject is this blue house. And I understand you want to do tight crop because maybe the surrounding area wasn't that interesting. I would still suggest you for the future to keep the whole main subject in. So specifically this part here cropped away, this part here as well. I don't really mind about the bottom, but again, here on the side, it's missing piece of roof. So these are the parts I would definitely want in the image. So that would be more for a composition. The rest is quite nice. It's blue and it has lots of details, but I would have gone a little wider for this capture. Now, talking about post-processing, there is not really much I would do because you would really have to break down the image. You would have to kind of start from the beginning. We could probably fix the leftover of the line here. That's really simple, just with a simple erase tool. I think either the line is there or it isn't there. So if you want to just remove it, I would just brush over it and click on erase. It should take just a second and that will take care of that. Maybe you could go even closer and take care of the parts in the arms so it's not visible at all, something like this. That would be the first thing. You could also take care of this little light leak here. Again, you just paint over it and click on erase. Looking at the sky, depending on what you use, it also seems a little bit noisy. So you could just use the denoise tool and maybe increase the luminosity to somewhere around 20, just to lower the noise together. Other than that, that's about it for this picture. This is where I would start. And then maybe just look for different sky, check your original image and check this part to see if you could maybe adjust it so it's not that visible. Moving on the second image, is there anything to do? Again, I would have to adjust the actual sky replacement to make sure that it's not as visible. When it comes to cropping, I would probably look and see if maybe you have an image which is not as cropped, because I think it's just overcrop. Maybe if you're not gonna include the gate, I would just crop it completely out. Really, I would just have to see the original image. Either way, David, it was a pleasure to see your images. Thank you so much for sending them over. Thank you very much for being creative and trying different things. It's great, but still a little bit of way to go. Definitely, if you talking or thinking about the natural look of the images, you really need to pay attention even to those small details as a direction of light, direction of shadows, and so on. Okay, moving on. I can see Dragan all the way from Croatia. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope to see your pictures soon too. So if you have some, make sure that you follow the link in the Facebook group or at the membership page. I will update links for April probably by Thursday or Friday this week, so you will be able to send us images for there. Okay, moving on, we moving towards Ed and his images. Just before we're going to do that, just a quick reminder to everyone who join us later. If you want to join us for the next episode of Photography Review Show, it's really simple. All you need to do is to visit our website, cleverphotographer.com/membership. Join us there and you will get access to this photography review show. You will get access to our Facebook, Clever Photographer Academy. And most importantly, you will get over 200 brand new assets every month. And right now, the membership is not only compatible with Lightroom and Photoshop, but it's also compatible with Luminar Neo. Who else we have? Cesar, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your comment. It's great to welcome you and see you for our show. And we are moving to more pictures. Ed, coming to you. 2 images of these little animals, cows here in this view under the trees. And then we have this quite epic capture of the mountains and rocks with very dramatic sky. So starting with the first picture, again, starting with the technical part of the image. So this is a mobile phone capture, I'm assuming, because it says Samsung on it, ISO 50, f2 1/240th of a second. Actually, with mobile phones, it's a little bit trickier to look at the camera settings because they work just a little bit differently than your usual DSLR or mirrorless cameras, but still we can zoom in and see that there's quite decent sharpness here. The light is nice. There's lots of light coming around, and probably the first thing I would be looking at is just the kind of time of the day. We always suggest for landscape photography that you should look for the times of the day when the light is a little bit more soft, maybe like a golden hour, sunset, sunrise, maybe overcast days. This is example of when the light is really harsh, which then creates really strong contrast between the dark parts and bright parts of the picture. Looking at it as a composition value, I like the cows. I think it creates a really nice contrast. On the other side, I'm not sure about this kind of, how you say, of course I will not remember about this link here which is holding the cows away. That's something I would either avoid it or I would remove it in post-processing. And in overall, because the light isn't really that interesting, I would maybe try to turn the image into black and white and see if that could help. We can try to do that in a moment. So in the meantime, let's have a look at the image number 2, where we can look at again the camera settings. It looks like this is a Panasonic. It may be also mobile phone, but moving on the camera settings, ISO 80, f3.2 and 1/800 of a second. This picture in overall is actually really nice. It's a lovely composition, but as a technical part, you can see a fair bit of noise in the sky actually when you zoom in, looking at it right here. What else? The sharpness isn't really great. It's a little bit of like a painterly, but as a mobile phone picture, it's not bad. I think for this picture, what's more important is the overall composition. I think it's really lovely. You get this really big rock, you get the dramatic sky, you have the nice snow. Overall, it's like a really lovely picture, and well done on that. Moving on to artistic part again, continuing with the artistic part and moving on to photo editing. For the first image, let's start with that and move into the editing module where we can use the erase tool and actually erase these lines here. So let's just zoom in and we can just paint over these. You can just hold the shift and it will create a straight line. And again, let's have a look. Once I select it, I just click on erase. So that will take care of the grass here. And of course, it didn't do it with my luck. So let's have a look and let's try again. If we can do it up here. Erase, that worked, perfect. So again, erase, great. And this is a way I would erase this part, perfect. And let's do the same for the top part. Excellent. We could also use cloning for this, but just for this exercise, we're going to use the erase. We could make the brush even smaller if we want to. And again, just erase this part, and let's see. So once we do all of this, we can continue and see what else we could do with this image. As I suggest, we could turn it to black and white. So we can do that. We just turn it to black and white. And that way we get rid of all the colors, which are a little bit distracting. The next thing I would do, I would probably make the exposure a little lower. Then we could add a vignette, which will also help us to close the image. And here in Luminar Neo, you can click on choose subject and actually adjust the center of the vignette. So I would probably point towards this area. After that, you can also click on advanced setting and increase the inner light to add more focus on the cows. To finish it off, we can use a super contrast. And here, adjust the contrast separately for highlights, midtones, and shadows. So starting with the highlights, we can just add them a little bit. With the midtones, definitely, and maybe with the shadow contrast, no, we leave it nice and low. Finally, just to add a little bit of texture, we can use the structure AI. We push that, and that way we end up with something like this, which I think is a little bit more interesting than where we started. Coming back to the catalog, we have the second image, which is really cool. I'm not going to do much here. I would use the vignette again. set the center of the vignette on the mountain and just bring it down to create a little bit more drama there. And what we could do, we could use the dramatic tool here in Luminar Neo, where you can push it and it really creates this really dramatic scene. Let's have a look at it before and after, and I think it's really cool. Coming back to the catalog, moving on to the next photographer. Ed, thank you very much for sending your images. It was a pleasure to review them. Few things just to adjust, but still well done. Next photographer is Elizabeth. Elizabeth, I have 2 images from you, so let's move on. Starting with the picture number 1, we have this really nice valley with the Canon. With the camera, we had the Canon here with the Tamron 28 to 300 millimeters. From the camera settings, ISO 100, f14, 1/125th of a second. So well done on the camera settings there. Everything is kind of spot on. Just with the f-stop, try to stay as low as possible. I understand sometimes it's a little bit tricky. You want to make sure that the details are all the way through, but really, usually the f11 does the job, and that way you can get really details all the way through. Zooming in, good level of details. I can see some sensor dust here, which you should really kind of keep an eye on. It takes few seconds to remove it in any tool you're using, and if you do that, then it will just kind of take away the distraction of that. Other than that, again, I think the sharpness is quite good. It's a lovely scene. I think the light is a little bit strong, but thanks to the sky, it's quite nicely balanced. Talking about composition here on this image, it's quite a lovely idea. I like how the depth go through the image. I quite like the sky with lovely kind of clouds, a little bit of drama, a little bit of blue. The details of the mountain works very well. The kind of leading line cutting through works very well too. You have some nice foreground here, and then the middle ground and background, I think it works well as well. So in overall, it's a lovely picture. It's more when it comes to post-processing, I think we need to adjust the colors a little bit, maybe also add little vignette to close the image and add more attention towards the center and towards the leading line. So we'll look at that in a moment. But before we do that, we look at the second image again. And this time we look at this lovely stairs with the building at the back. Now, again, we're talking about Canon camera with a Tamron 28 to 300. With the camera settings, ISO 100, 31 millimeters, f14, and 1/100th of a second. So as the camera setting goes, again, nothing wrong with that. Keep an eye on the f-stop. There's a lovely level of details with a little bit of noise. When you kind of zoom in, you can see it around the people and so on, but that's not a big deal. You can see also a little bit of chromatic aberration. That's those green and purple lines. But in overall, when you look at the image, it's quite nice, sharp, and fresh. It's nicely saturated. So in overall, it's a lovely, lovely picture. Moving on the artistic part, it's a lovely idea. The foreground, I think, works very well. What I think works the best on these type of pictures is when you make sure that you find really the middle, the balanced middle of the light and of the stairs to create very symmetric view. So what I would do, I would probably move more towards the right from my point of view and really try to place these lamps in a line, one behind each other. So another thing which looking at the image is that I'm looking at it and I'm wondering, what is the main subject? What is it you're trying to show me? Is it the flowers here in front? Is it the lampposts and a fountain, or is it the house? So there's just lots happening. And because you have the f14, there is no depth of field. So the eyes are not sure what you're trying to show. So a few things you could do differently. You could bring the f-stop down a little bit and maybe have the house a little softer if you would be focusing on this. If you were trying to show the house, I would probably suggest you to move a little bit more towards the sides and have the house and the lamps on next to each other rather than covering each other. Just different things you could try to do. Talking about Post-processing, there is nothing really much I would do here. I think it's nicely done. You could do a little bit of noise reduction if you would want to, very simply by jumping into the edit again. In the edit, go into the denoise and maybe use something like a 20 to start with. You would have to play around with it to make sure you get the most out of your sharpening and remove most of the noise. Other than that, it's nicely done. Again, you could add a little bit of vignette to close the image, but in overall, it's lovely. Coming back to the catalog and talking about the first image, this is where I was mentioning two things. One is the white balance. I think it's in overall a little bit too green. And this often happens when the camera capture image where there is a lot of one of the dominant colors. So that can be green or blue. Those are the prime examples. And as there is lots of green here, the camera then pushes this green haze into the rest of the image. So if I'll show you what I mean by that, we can adjust it by going into develop and then going into color. And here we can adjust the white balance. So if I take the tint slider and bring it up, somewhere probably around here, it will already get better. What I also see is that there is lots of blue, so I would go into the temperature and add a little bit of warmth. Nothing crazy, just somewhere around here. Now, when we look at the picture, it almost looks like I haven't changed anything until I show you the before and after. The before, there is a really kind of heavy mix of blue and green haze over the entire image. Now, you would understand that that would be the case for the trees and the valley. However, the mountains and the sky shouldn't have this haze on them. So to adjust it, you can use the white balance in the color section of the develop tool. Or you can also use the color tool and increase the remove color cast here, which also helps in overall to remove that. You could also use the HSL panel, many different ways to do this, but this is what I would do. And on the top of it, I would also add a vignette. Again, just to close the view and focus more on the center of the picture. So that's that bit. I already show you how to remove the sensor dust. However, just one more time, you use the erase tool, then you go to the bottom into object removal and you just click on remove dust spots. The application scan the image, find these spots and just remove them for you. So right away, before and after, it only takes a few seconds and it's done. Moving back, Elizabeth, thank you very much for sending your pictures. It's always such a pleasure to see them. So a little bit of white balance adjustments on the first one, and on the second, a little bit more thought into the composition. Also keep an eye on your edges. This is a little bit too close to the main subject here, so maybe just something to think of next time, to do 1 or 2 steps back and get more, so that way you can crop it and end up with whatever you need. Now, this brings us nicely to Evgeny and his pictures. This week, mostly with macro captures of the bees. This sets us very nicely to the spring. Spring is coming. Anyway, definitely here in Europe. I'm really excited to see that we get some sunny days. The time change also just happened, so we get more time to go out and capture pictures. So that's really exciting. I hope that I will see more pictures from this year already from you guys, because the winter was again really long and it's time to take the cameras out. But coming back to Evgeny and his 2 pictures. First come first, starting with this guy right here, captured with the Pentax, with the camera settings, ISO 400, 300 millimeters, f/0.7 and 1/500th of a second. Now, I think the f-stop sometimes doesn't really show correctly here, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. However, the ISO 400, yeah, not really giving us too much noise, so that's nicely done. I think in past, I saw that maybe you use something like a topaz denoise or some denoising tool. I think that's really cool, because that's the way to remove it on a macro photography. The light is really nice, nicely diffused. I actually really like how the flower and everything adds more light into the main subject. I think that works really nicely here. The level of details is nice. It's not pinpoint sharp. I mean, some parts are, some parts aren't. I think we get lots of sharpness on this part, but you get a little bit of soft spots here. So Again, you get lots of sharpness here and a little bit of softness here with little glow around it as well. Now, I think that if you would really want to capture this with the full details, you would maybe have to use stacking, or you would really have to try different methods. So I understand it's not easy, but I still think that it's a beautiful, beautiful picture. So Evgeny, well done on that. Camera setting good. For the composition, I really like it. I would maybe crop the main subject a little bit more in a center. In fact, let's do that right away. So maybe a little bit more like this, just because it really is all about him, and that way you get a bit more of that. Once we here, we can also jump into the vignette and just close the picture a little bit more. Again, just adding more attention to the center. If I would have a little bit more time, I would probably run the B, or I think it's a B. I would run it again in more sharpening, and then I would just apply the sharpening to the actual animal. I wouldn't sharpen anything else because everything else works, just this animal here. In overall, lovely capture. So let's go back and move on the picture number 2. Now, this is kind of really spring feeling image. I really, really like that, where the first one is almost like a summer, lots of warmth. The second one is, you can see that the ground is quite bare, still cold. And in the middle of it, in the middle of this very natural, dark, earthy colors, you get this lovely, lovely flower with the purple tones and this bee coming from a side. So talking about camera again, it's a Pentax K100D Super with the camera settings. Again, but tricky to say if they are right, but let's say that it's ISO 400, 300 millimeters, so zoomed all the way in, f0.7 and 1/750th of a second. Now, from the camera settings, let's move in and let's see. There's a little, maybe because it's a smaller capture, it's a smaller JPEG, I can see a little bit of artifacts, but in overall, you can see that the sharpness was there. Also on this guy, you can see that the sharpness was there, definitely at this part. I'm not sure in overall because, again, the resolution isn't too big, but I think it's still very, very lovely capture. Now, talking about composition, I think it's great. I really like the fact that you get this depth with these soft elements in front. Then you get the flower, and you get everything from the flower. I think that's important, that you get these little parts, and you have the ground that works really well. Then the background, creating this almost bokeh effect, works really well too. You have the animal flying in, again, that works well with lots of details. You have this natural depth, you have an almost soft light, so that works really well too. So in overall, it's actually a great picture, Evgeny. Well done, congratulations, great job on that. Now, when it comes to post-processing on this one, what could we do differently? If we quickly jump into the edit, again, we could add even more vignette there, and I think maybe something like this. Let's see, somewhere around here, and then a little bit of more inner light. What I would probably add is a little bit more warmth, just maybe something like this. The good thing is that with the golden hour slider here in Luminar Neo, it adds the warmth only to the specific areas of the image. So if I'll show you the before and after, I think you can see a little bit the difference. And on this picture, because it's kind of almost magical, mystical, I would probably use the mystical slider as well, which adds a little bit of like a romantic glow to the picture. And I think that could actually work nicely too. So to show you, this is the before and this is the after, and I think it's very, very lovely. Congratulations, Evgeny. Great, great capture. Both of them are lovely, and it was great to see them. Don't forget to send us more pictures for next week if you can. Once again, I will be publishing the dates and the links over the next few days. Moving on, Zdeněk, the last photographer of the week. Zdeněk, all the way from South Africa. We have this animal right here, and then we have this epic tree. I really like that. I like the sky, I like the tree. Well done there. So starting with the animal. Zdeněk, Canon 77D with the lens 55 to 250 millimeters. And when it comes to camera settings, ISO 1600, 250 millimeters, f8 1/400 of a second. So obviously the ISO is higher. It is a wildlife capture with the long lens. So I assume that that's maybe where the ISO is coming from. f8, what was the lens? I wonder if you could have gone just a little bit lower, maybe even the f5.6. I understand that you really wanted to make sure that the animal is there in full focus, but I would maybe just test it and see. 1/400 of a second, giving us good sharpness, so that's all good. And to be honest, for 1600, I think the noise is quite manageable. Obviously, it's there, you can see it, you can't kind of get away from it, but it's quite decent. What I really like is the overall composition. I think it works really nicely. I like the contrast of the animal with the rest of the image. Even though she has that kind of natural dark brown, I think it works nicely with the bright background. The other elements like the trees gives us actually a really nice depth. If I would wish something to be differently, I would wish her head was poking out a little bit more, so that way you avoid hiding the face with this branch. But that's more wish rather than something you have done wrong. And overall, as a composition and as an artistic part, I really like it. I mean, I always look at the image, and my first thought or my first way of thinking is, could I print this? Would I put this on my wall? Because I think that's the most important thing. You're capturing images which you then want to show to other people. And if I look at the image, even mine or anyone else, and I look at it, I think I wouldn't, that's the kind of image you keep in your Lightroom or Luminar for forever. You never really export it. Then it's not the picture. But this is definitely something which I can imagine to be printed on a canvas, put on a wall, because it has a character, and I think it works very well. And again, because the colors are kind of minimal, it really helps to the overall feel. So well done on that image. Moving to the second image, more landscape feel here. We are on Canon 600D, 18 to 55 millimeters, and we have ISO 400 here, 34 millimeters, f11, 1/200 of a second. Zdeněk, ISO 400, I talk about it over and over. As much as possible, try to stick with 100 if it's possible. 34 millimeters is quite nice. It's still quite wide, but giving you a really nice focus on the main subject on the tree. And f11 giving you sharpness all the way through. So you have a sharpness on the tree, and I mean, looking at it with these details, of course, it's on the way. You can really see details almost on the tree here at the back. So that's quite cool. Well done there. The sky is nice with the little light from there. I'm not sure if it's the original one, but I think it kind of fit there quite nicely. So well done on that. So technically, I think it's nicely done. It's kind of washed out look, so that works nicely. When it comes to composition, I think it's nicely done too. The contrast of the green with the mountain behind, I think there is just enough space around it. I quite like the crop that you have a little bit of space here, and that there are these trees at the back. I think that gives us the depth. So you kind of have the main tree, and then you have another tree, and then it kind of continues. The texture in the sky with the clouds works nicely. The sun works nicely. So in overall, Zdeněk is very, very lovely. I think it's a little bit different. Now let's talk about what we could do in post-processing with it. Now, looking at it, the first thing I'm thinking is this kind of selective color look. I think that would work really nicely, actually. What you could do is you could go into the black and white, convert it to black and white, and then just pick the green. So you could do something like this. And actually, looking at it, that could be something a little bit different. What you could do then, you could go into the structure, push the amount, so we get a little bit more drama, and I would finish it off by a really strong vignette. So let's say, maybe not as strong, but let's say something like this. Then you select the tree, and you get something like this, which is a little bit different. I know that is more kind of special effect, but I think it looks actually really, really cool. So that would be first thing you could do with it. So revert it to original again. If you would want to go more with this washed out effect, what I would do, I would probably actually add a little bit more brightness. I would make the highlights even stronger and add a little bit of contrast, so we get this back. after this, what works really nicely for this type of looks is to go into the high key and push it from there as well. So that way you get this really washed effect. And to kind of make it even more cinematic, you can, for example, use the matte tool and add that kind of fade, which is very, very popular now. So you could end up with something like this. That could be another thing you could kind of work with. What you would do probably, you would maybe go into the color and make the green a little bit stronger in the HSL panel. So maybe something like this, and get something like this. So they are kind of two different approaches on what I would try to do with this image, because yeah, just kind of give you different ideas of what you could do. Or you could obviously just continue with what you already done. Just very simple improvements, maybe a little bit with Accent AI. I would still add vignette here just to bring it down a little bit. Maybe just somewhere around here and place it around the tree. And maybe just leave it from there. It's just something very subtle from there. So Zdeněk, I hope this was helpful. Just a few different options of what you could do with this image. The picture of the animal, if we bring it in, I think it's already really good. I wouldn't do much things differently here. You could add vignette just to make it more, not vignette. You could add a fade just to make it a little bit more cinematic if you would want to, maybe with just extra contrast. You could add vignette, just like I was trying to say earlier, and just close it a little bit more if you would want to. Just whatever you like. I think it's already quite natural. I wouldn't push it too far because then it would start to look over-processed. I think this already looks great, and it was really, really nice capture. So Zdeněk, well done. Great 2 captures. I really enjoyed this one. And what we done with the selective color, I think it was really, really cool. I think that's a great look. Okay, I think we are done for the week with all the entries. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. If you want to join us for next week, you already know what to do. Make sure that you use the links in Facebook Academy or in the membership area. If you want to join us, find out more about it on our website, cleverphotographer.com. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in the chat. It was really nice to see that we got more people. Zdeněk, Evgeny, Cesar, Dragan. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're going to have a great week. Make sure you take your camera out, get some nice captures, and send them over. I can't wait to see you next week and at the same time, Monday, 6 p.m.